Hello, and welcome to another episode of Myths and Stories, a Destiny 2 lore podcast. We are continuing our series on the Vex. Last time we left off with the escape question mark of Praedyth from the Vault of Glass with the assistance of some of the variants of Maya Sundaresh and the Ishtar team from I think our first or second episode in this series. We talked about the various simulated copies that were in the network. So they assisted Praedyth with escaping, seemingly. We don't necessarily have confirmation, but it all points in that direction. And then talked about the sundial and Osiris's original creation of it to use Vex Tech and the Infinite Forest to time travel across the various timelines of Mercury, and with the intention of rescuing Saint 14, and was unsuccessful in doing so. And then the Red Legion found his project and tried to use it to go back and win the war. So there was a lot of theory craft and a lot of lore exposition around Praedyth. So we didn't get much further in the timeline outside of that.
It's funny you mentioned theory crafting with Praedyth because you and I also had discussions before this, and we came up with more theories with Praedyth. I guess more clarifications.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that Praedyth escaped to our timeline, but that may not even be the case because the Vault of Glass exists outside of our timeline and therefore outside of our reality. It's just we happen to have an entrance point to it attached to our reality. So Praedyth could have just popped out in a different timeline, different reality altogether. Like he may have popped out somewhere where there are no guardians, where Dark has already taken over the universe, and
Yeah.
he's the only guardian. Like there's so much more of a story there than I even realized up until that point when I was like, oh my god, he could be literally anywhere and any when. And that's mind blowing to me. That was just a super neat thing that we thought of.
Yeah, I mean, it could even be a case where he popped into our reality, but like pre-Golden Age.
Yeah.
Um,
Now he's the light bearer before the guardian, before the traveler even shows up in the system. Like what does that mean?
well, but he's not because he lost his ghost.
Oh,
Remember,
that's right. So he wouldn't have any way to
so
like
he would just have his knowledge that he brings
right.
with him.
Oh my god.
So some interesting implications with Praedyth for sure. I really do hope he shows up again somewhere
I hope
in
so
the
too.
storyline
I
at
think he
some
will
point.
in those post Lightfall episodes.
I think so too. I think that's a good place for him to show up. But yeah, so we are going to be starting off this episode doing a little bit of a jump in time to the season of arrivals, which, as a reminder to everybody, that was the season where the pyramid ships first kind of appeared in full in the solar system, just before uh, yeah, the removal of some of the
The
main
big blip.
planets. Yeah,
I
the
remember the
big
one that
blip.
was the one that sat right over. I think the very first mission you come across the one that's sitting on Io. That's
Hmm.
it's sitting over the last place that the traveler touched on Io, where Ikora went to kind of like reflect during the Red War. And underneath it is we see the first instance of the Tree of Silver Wings, which it was funny. It was funny we mentioned that too because Myth and I were just talking, or we were running a Root of Nightmares last night with the group with the clan, and they were asking about the Tree of Silver Wings in there. And we're like, yeah, remember that is the Tree of Silver Wings happens anytime the forces of light and the forces of dark touch each other. That is the end result of what happens in our reality is that Tree of Silver Wings forms. And then Root of Nightmare, of course, we're just spending the entire time germinating it and making it grow.
Yep. Uh, Now, in Season of Arrivals, the main kind of seasonal event, I guess, or the seasonal activity was called Contact, because we were using kind of gambit technology to gather up motes of dark, bank them, and establish a connection of communication between ourselves and the pyramid ships to receive these transmissions that were then translated by Eris. And we had a number of, as you did the activity, there was a number of enemy types that would appear. Say in some cases it was uh, like Cabal. I think in other cases it was Elixni trying to maybe not trying to stop you per se, but like they were just, they were hostile and they were probably trying to gain our technology more than anything that we were
Sure.
using in the activity. But one of the races that tries to prevent you from communicating is the Vex. And the Vex, we could argue, I may have had a more legitimate reason to try and disrupt our communication with the dark, um, and try to usurp it for themselves. So,
Ooh.
because the Vex have had, they have made contact with darkness before at the garden,
I mean, the Black
and
Heart.
right, and now the pyramid ships, a source of darkness, are scattered throughout the solar system in a very big way. It would make a certain amount of sense for the Vex to be like, we need to study these. We need to
Sure.
try and analyze to figure out how these are going to affect
You,
what's going on.
do you think they would just be naturally drawn to it because of their interactions with the or because of what they did in the garden for the Black Heart? Like they'd see this source of darkness and be like, okay, this is exactly what we've been worshiping and we lost it. This we can find it again with this.
Yes and no. I don't so I don't believe there's anything that indicates that the Soul Divisive is the group of Vex that are attempting to usurp our communications.
Oh, that's right, because
Uh,
they're specifically the garden
right.
Vex. Okay, yeah,
Um, but they are or were, if they become cut off, part of the Vex collective mind at one point. So their observations of the darkness presumably are still floating around the Vex network somewhere.
sure,
And although the Vex as a whole may not have adopted this worship um, kind of idea that the Soul Divisive did, the information that was gained about the heart and about darkness in general should still be available to them. So
sure,
that may have been enough for them to be like, this darkness thing that we heard about seems an awful lot like the power radiating off those giant pyramids. Maybe we should look into that.
makes sense.
So, needless to say, they are one of the groups that try and prevent us from communicating during those contact missions. Uh, there's never a concrete motive stated, but we can maybe infer why they may have been trying to do that. Um, Interestingly enough, and along a similar vein, during the Festival of the Lost, during Season of Arrivals, there are a couple of lore entries from the masks that you can pick up in Festival of the Lost that give us some information as to the Vex moving on the Dreadnought.
Interesting. Why would they be? I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense because the dreadnought is an extension of the ascendant plane.
Yes, extension of the Ascendant Plane, a now abandoned throne world.
Sure,
Um, Maybe abandoned isn't the right word. Like
we could say abandoned.
destitute. But and in addition to that, like the Dreadnought probably has a lot of the same kind of dark energies swirling around.
Sure,
And so maybe the Vex are like, okay, there's this is another avenue to discover more about these things that have shown up in our solar system. So we're going to read through the flavor text on some of the quests that we were going on for Festival of the Lost. And all of these quests are tied to Spider. So the first one is a quest line that was called A Smiling Mask. And the flavor text for it says, it's been a while since the spider asked us for help directly. I get the feeling that the festival is just an opportune cover to hide what he's really after. And so we go through, we talk to Spider. He tells us that uh, he wants us to collect these decoders of sorts, and just through like playing the various ritual stuff. And then the next quest line is a cunning mask, in which the flavor text reads, "I knew it. We're running Spider's errands again." And wait a minute, did he say a salvage operation in the rings of Saturn? You don't think dot dot dot.
Oh, I do think.
Uh, and then we use this decoder of his to unlock a cache of supplies in the haunted forest during Festival of the Lost. And this one is titled A Masked Treasure. And the flavor text for it says this: something about this feels off. What would the Vex want with fallen salvage? Why bring it into one of their simulations? I have a very bad feeling about this. So we're in the
Is
haunted
this the
forest.
season where we got that ascendant lens?
Ascendant lens.
You remember that item that we got in game? I swear it was. Maybe it
Yeah,
was this
what?
quest line, but it was just like a mundane thing. Like nobody could figure out what
Yes.
it was.
Yes, this
Is
is
this the quest line that
exactly.
leads to that? Holy shit! I'm starting
Yeah.
to understand like what the implications of that could be. Okay, keep going, keep going. I'm following. I had a thought there, and I had to get that thought out there before it left me with my little squirrel brain. But I think this is the quest line that leads to us getting that ascendant lens.
Yes, this is. This is the
Okay,
quest line that leads to that.
okay.
Um
Not to be the guy that reads the last chapter and then says, "Okay, I'll buy the book now," but there's the last chapter.
Yeah. But no, so what has happened is we've gotten this decoder to open this treasure, this cache. But we're opening this cache from that's inside the haunted forest, which is the infinite forest with a,
I
slightly
was
spookier theme.
I was going to say,
Uh
from my understanding, the versions of it before, like now the haunted stuff is all the lost sectors, but before I thought that I was under the impression that the logic is when we go through the haunted forest, it is actually a branch of the infinite forest. It's like one of those alternate timeline simulation things
yeah.
where like the world has gone dark and that's all. This is all that there is darkness, and this is a world without light type thing.
Yeah. Yep. Now what makes this interesting? So Spider, if we put the puzzle pieces together here a little bit, Spider has sent a team to the Dreadnought and they collected something from it. And the Vex were so interested that rather than follow them there, because fallen are not paracausal, they created a simulation of that fallen team going to the Dreadnought and doing whatever they were doing.
Isn't the logic of that so fucked up but so perfect? Like
Yeah.
because of the way the Vex operate, they see that and they're like, "Well, we don't know what they're going after. We'll just simulate it." Like,
Right.
We'll
and then
just
we'll know.
simulate and create it, and then they know. Like that's brilliant. That's super cool.
So because they knew, hey, those Fallen collected these caches of resources from the Dreadnought that were locked and unable to be opened, Spider went, okay, the Fallen have a perfect copy of these real treasure chests that we have that we can't open. So I'm gonna send the Guardian in to the simulated version to figure out how to open the simulated treasure chest because that will tell me how
Then
to
we
open
can
the real
reverse
one.
engineer it. Okay. All right, Spider. All right, you son of a bitch. I see you. Merchandising son of a bitch. I see you.
Yeah. So, needless to say, um, we return. Spider, congratulates us on our ability to, learn to access this cache. Um, and in exchange for us getting him this salvage, he offers us this ascendant lens, which is just the text on the lens is a focusing lens from the dreaming city through which the ascendant plane can sometimes be seen.
And I'm telling you right now, I went all over the Dreaming City with that thing in my inventory. I don't know that anyone. I think in my head it does something. I've long since dismantled it. Like
Yeah,
I'm sure you still got it sitting in your vault somewhere.
I
Margie
think
still has her
so.
toothbrush. Um,
Yes, I have that too.
but did anyone ever figure out what this thing did? Like the fact that he has just an ascendant lids that he could see into the ascendant plane. That's not what was in the cache, was it?
No, that's what he gave us as our reward for doing what he wanted us to do, or for us, doing the job he requested. So we
Sure.
don't know what was in the cache still. Um,
But the Vex wanted it.
and
Had to have been paracausal. Because
yeah,
they didn't necessarily have to simulate what was in the cache. They just had to simulate the cache itself and how to open it. Or they didn't even need how to open it. They could just sit there and study that over and over again. Dude, that is
right.
brilliant. That is genuinely brilliant.
So so just as an aside, the Ascendant lens was eventually able to be turned into Mara, uh, many years later.
Oh my god.
um, or excuse me, a year later, many seasons later, um, during the next Festival of the Lost, and she just gave you a like bigger
A bigger piece of
candy
candy.
bag.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
So
Okay.
little bit of a letdown there, but the flavor text from that final quest line says this: why was the House of Kings researching hive magic in the ruins of Oryx's dreadnought? And why would the Vex try and steal it? And what value does any of this have to Spider?
Mysteries upon mystery upon mysteries. Like this is a level of like true crimes unknown. Like I don't know who the real killer is at this point.
So, what we can deduce from this, because there's a lot of open ended questions, what we can deduce from this is that House of Kings was researching hive magic on the Dreadnought, and the Vex were interested enough in it to try to simulate it to then try and steal the knowledge or know the same thing that the House of Kings discovered on the Dreadnought. So the Vex were at least trying to keep tabs on hive magic, if nothing else.
I mean, it's another form of darkness, right?
Yeah, of a
Another, no,
sort.
again, thinking back to the tie to the Black Heart, like as much as the divisive, the soul divisive are kind of like their own entity and kind of cut off from the rest of the Vex, or at least the Vex see them as like they've tried to like bastardize them and say they or like you can't be part of us and separate them off. I think there's still like what you're saying. There's that knowledge is still in the Vex network of the Black Heart because otherwise, why would they if they tried to like delete all knowledge of it, it'd be like they wouldn't even care that it was there or wasn't there.
Right.
So to me, that knowledge still has to be somewhere, and some Vex subroutine is still enthralled with the idea of darkness and is still chasing it, albeit at a very subroutine level.
Yeah, at the very least, they recognize that it is a threat, a potential threat, and like they're trying to do what they do. They're trying to analyze it, even if analysis is impossible.
Right.
They're going to try
It's just
anyway.
that's their nature. That's just what they do.
So, with that wonderfully terrifying little grain of knowledge, we skip into Beyond Light, um, which honestly was not very Vex heavy in things that were going on.
Sure.
Um, the big thing that was involving the Vex, although it was kind of tangentially, was the strike on Europa.
The
Uh,
reopening of the portal.
yep. So, during you do this, you can do it in the strike playlist now, but it was also part of the campaign at the time Beyond Light came out. Um, Aramis during the campaign, Aramis reestablishes the portal that connects 2082 Volantis to Europa. And I'm not going to go over what 2082 Volantis is in detail. We talk about it a little bit in the series. We talk about it a lot in the Clovis Bray series specifically. So you can check those out for more in-depth info. But it is a Vex world essentially. Um,
I hesitate
on
to say a homeworld, but
it
I'm
feels
I'm gonna
like
call it
it,
homeworld.
but yeah, it feels like the closest thing we've gotten to a Vex homeworld anyway.
Sure.
But this was a portal originally established by Clovis Bray. This is how he farmed radiolaria to use to create exos. Um, and then it was shut down by a very long and bloody battle at the hands of Elsie and Banshee and a few other members that were a part of their group. um, Aramis is reestablishing this connection at this point in the story as kind of a Hail Mary to try and eliminate the Guardians, kind of having the mindset at this point in the campaign of like, you know, if I can't stop you, at least I'll take you with me, kind of thing.
Sure.
And so she opens this portal, the Vex come pouring through. Our Guardian, with the help of Elsie Bray, is successful in fighting the Vex back, but not before Aramis is able to harvest all of the radiolaria that pooled in that room as part of opening that portal. And I thought this was kind of interesting. Apparently, there is a voice line from the original campaign for that mission of the campaign that seems to point to that radiolaria being drained in order for it to then be shipped over to the Deepstone Crypt and convert Atrax into an exo.
Oh, okay. So that's why Atrax is what Atrax is.
Yeah, that's where all
Interesting.
the radiolaria came from, was from that mission or strike.
I mean, that makes sense because, like, if they just had it in the Deep Stone Crypt, like, they wouldn't have a need to open the portal anyway. Like,
Right.
I know the opening of the portal is kind of like that 2-part thing. Like, one, release Vex into the wild, and now the Guardians have to deal with something else while Aramis can go do her secret squirrel stuff. And then part two, I knew it was draining somewhere. I didn't realize that Aramis was the one draining it specifically to cart it off to DSC, so then she could make Atrax what Atrax is into the first, presumably only. I don't know. Does Tanix count? Tanix kind of counts.
No.
Uh, he half counts, right? A shank is not exactly exotech, but
No. No.
but yeah, to make the first and presumably only exo fallen,
Hmm.
that being Atrax 1, but had to have the radiolarian from somewhere. So
Yep.
why not open the portal and then Now it's all there. Cool. Now I've got a draining process for it that's already all these systems are in place. They were built back in the golden age by Clovis, so now Aramis can just take advantage of it and be like, okay, now I'm going to go do what I'm going to go do the thing.
Mm-hmm. Um,
Now those two mines that were in there as part of that strike, are they important mines? Or they just happen to like come through and be like, oh God, this is a big thing. Deal with it.
yeah, as far as I could tell, they did not appear to be important in any meaningful way to the larger goings on.
Like they weren't in charge of any type of subroutines or anything like that. They
Doesn't
weren't
seem
sole
like it.
divisive level mines.
No, I mean clearly they were access mines, but I think they were access mines that were probably the original ones leading the charge to against Clovis way back when, and
Oh,
they've just
sure.
been, their program's been dormant until there was a need for them again.
Sure. And that makes sense for the Vex too. Like they wouldn't dismantle it. They would just be like, hey, in case this happens again, we've already got a subroutine built for it. Execute subroutine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so that's kind of the only real meaningful uh presence that the Vex have in Beyond Light.
The only other thing that I have to say about Beyond Light, and specifically Europa,
Mm-hmm.
is the Vex structures that are inside the Nexus section of Europa are insanely similar to the Pyramidian style.
They are.
And I've always been curious, like, is there a connection there? Is this because the Pyramidian is on Io, which is a moon of Jupiter, right? Or is that a moon of Saturn?
Uh,
Is Io Jupiter? I think Io is Jupiter. Um, and Europa is also Jupiter. So I was curious if they're building
yes.
a giant portal, like using the moons as like connecting points for a giant portal to open over Jupiter. Because that would be fucking insane. Like that'd be cool as
I would
shit.
be.
But that would be like I don't. How would the Guardians deal with a force like that? Like that's a insane idea. But
Yeah.
it seems plausible for the Vex because again, those structures are extremely similar, and we still don't really truly have an idea of what those structures do.
Right. So just to confirm for you, yes, Jupiter, you were correct.
Yay!
Uh yeah, there's a lot of environmental storytelling that we can speculate on.
Sure,
As far as I am aware, there's nothing written to
nothing
tell
hard.
us
Okay.
like why they're there, what they do.
It just I've always found it super interesting that and Io's Vex structures were so similar.
It is a really interesting comparison. I mean, I guess to a point, like all Vex structures follow
Sure,
the same,
sure. It's like all darkness stuff is the same, all Hive stuff is the same. Yeah, no,
yeah.
yeah,
So there's probably a certain degree of that going on. But that's not to say that that maybe that was another entrance to the Vault of Glass at some point.
sure, sure.
Maybe that was another entrance to the Pyramidion at some point. If the Pyramidion trying to be the kind of the next Vault of Glass, maybe they did at one point have multiple entries, or it could just be that the Vex that survived the original closing of the portal and the fight to get there have just been chilling on Europa, slowly turning it into a machine planet because that's what they do.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I guess that's the thing too. Is could Europa have been like a backup plan because the Io was taken, and Io's now
yeah,
presumably permanently taken. Um, so could this be another backup plan for the Pyramidion, like a backdoor entrance or something that was being built there? I don't know.
it could be. I feel like they've made a lot of progress if they just started on that plan after IO disappeared.
Right, right. It is
uh,
Vex, so they could have reinserted
this
themselves in
is true.
Io's past and
This
had
is
that much
true.
time to build it back up.
No, that is a very good point.
So,
So
like I said,
yeah,
when it comes to building shit in real time, the Vex are the most efficient thing possible. Like they'll just go back, they'll just calculate how long it takes to build it, and just go back in time. Well, I say back in time, reinsert themselves into that period of history, and that version of Vex will just start building it then and go, okay, it's going to
Hmm.
take this amount of time to get there. Once time catches up with you guys, here it is, making it look instantaneous.
Yeah, no, that's true. Like building time doesn't really
It's
apply
it's
when
it's
it comes to
non-existent.
Vex
It's
architecture.
non-existent. That's what I love about it. Like the Vex are the real story here, and we're just a part of it. Like we just happen to be along for the ride at this point in time. Like whatever all the Vex are building has already happened in whatever timeline that they've gone backwards in time. And again, not backwards in time, that they've sent that information, relayed that to the Vex of a previous time, has started building whatever needs to be built for the Vex to reach their end goal. And we're just at like the midway build stage of everything.
Yeah.
That's mind
Yep.
blowing. So I love the Vex. They're I now love all entities of Destiny, and they're all my friends.
So a fun little trivia, kind of along the same vein. So you know how Vex Minotaurs have that wonderfully annoying habit of
Bullshit ass
teleporting
teleport. Yeah.
just as you like shoot your
Just as
heavy
you shoot your
or
freaking Nova at
whatever.
them or something. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
Throw a
So
grenade and it chucks right through them, and you're just like, God damn it.
in universe, what is happening is the Minotaur, like every time the Minotaur teleports, is a time that it died and it sent the
Oh
information of the
shit.
death of that death back to it
And
the
just
previous
and just booped
version
him
of
sideways
itself.
by 5 feet. You
Yep.
gotta be fucking kidding me.
It goes,
That's
"Hey, you died
brilliant.
here. Move, move instead of going that way, you're going to go this way." And like those teleports are meant to
That's
showcase
real
like
time communication of Vex
it
happening
is
across. Oh my god.
seeing its own futures multiple times and trying to avoid us being able to destroy it.
Dude,
Uh,
that's brilliant. I mean that's all Vex. That's why all
yeah.
Vex teleport. Like that's I'm pretty sure all of them. I know Minotaurs do it the worst. Like they're the worst about it, but I'm pretty sure all Vex teleport.
Not in the way Minotaurs do. I mean,
Okay.
they teleport for transport.
Oh, sure. Like
But
when they like transmat in. I put that in
yeah.
quotations because they don't transmatting in. They're just appearing there essentially.
Yep. Yeah.
Being accessed from the network at that location.
Yeah. So a little bit of trivia there for you. So technically, every time the Minotaur teleports, you've already killed it once.
You've already killed it. You beat it.
Yeah.
You win.
And in a slightly different timeline, you're done with that fight and moving on to the next room. And you just,
Good job, Guardian.
but yeah. So that kind of leaves Beyond Light and actually quite a bit after Beyond Light is very Vex free.
Sure.
They don't really make a big presence in any way until we get to Season of the Splicer. That's the
This is
next big Vex thing.
this is like Vex centric season. Like it like that whole season. We are splicing the network. We are Neo. We are the Matrix.
Yeah, I was gonna say it is and it isn't. It's one of those it's one of those things where the Vex, because they don't care about having a history or a culture or even communication in a classical sense, we only ever can see what is going on with the Vex from the eyes of the things having to deal with them at a given point in time. And so season of the Splicer is kind of this odd crossroads of like, yes, it's very Vex centric, but a lot of the stories being told during Season of the Splicer, as far as like the lore books and the lore cards on the equipment and those kinds of things, most of those stories are centered around the what's happening in the city at the time, which is the endless night and
Yeah.
the moving in of the Elixni to the Elixni quarter in the last city.
Because that endless night is one of those futures that Osiris showed us. Right?
Well, he showed us like everything was dark, like everything
The
was
entire
blacked
solar
out
system.
across the solar system.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was always under the impression that like the that season, the night, constant night in the tower was one of Osiris's. Like I saw this in one of my run throughs in the Infinite Forest, and now it's starting to come to pass. Which then, of course, started panic amongst people, and then you, at the same time, you had Elixni moving into the city, which then, provided another outlet for more panic, and be like, oh, well, it's the Elixni doing it. Like, I know that was a big thing, or at least that was my understanding of the of what was happening there.
Now, yeah, I do think um we could maybe look to Osiris's original prophecies, um,
Yeah,
and say that one of those could potentially apply. So probably the closest one would be Osiris's prophecy for the that is on the Infinite Paths 8 gun. And that prophecy says, they sowed the first, now reap the last. Forever narrows to a line where light will fade into the past. When all's converted, nothing shines.
yeah, that, yeah. I
So
suppose so. Yeah,
you could kind of say that apply. That seems to be the closest one I can at a glance that seems
sure.
to line up a little bit. Um, but the thing to remember is that Osiris during Season of the Splicer was not actually Osiris.
Oh, that's right.
This was
That's
Savathun.
right. He was Savasus.
Yes, Osiris.
Osiris, that's what it was. Osiris. This was a season where we got the Deicide gun, and if any of you have Deicide in your vault, you're wrong.
We're going to talk about it, so you'll find out exactly why. Um, but yeah, so even though the Vex like didn't have weren't telling stories amongst themselves or anything like that, that's not to say we don't have some information about the Vex and about what we were doing with them during Season of the Splicer. So, for those unaware, Season of the Splicer started off with the Vex placing a simulation uh, around the last city, and it was a simulation of an eternal night sky. And I shouldn't even say night sky because I don't believe there were stars or anything. It was just
Complete darkness.
dark. Yeah, blotted out the sun. There was no light, no natural light coming into the city. Um, and the Vanguard reached out to Mithrax, knowing that Ikora through her hidden, knowing that he was a splicer and that he was currently the Kel of the House of Light. And so she reached out to him in hopes that he could provide assistance with dealing with this Vex simulation that now blanketed the city. Mithrax uh, sends a essentially distress beacon back, and our guardian uses that to track him down under the direction of Ikora, and we find him. And he find him kind of hunkered down in a bunker of sorts. House of Light is being tracked and uh, attacked over and over and over by the Vex. Most likely because the Vex know Mithrax is someone that could undo their simulation. Because again, Mithrax is not paracausal. Although his splicer abilities are, they don't necessarily need to know how the splicer abilities work to know that Mithrax himself is a risk to their plans.
Sure.
Uh, so the Vex are trying to hunt down Mithrax and House Light. He agrees to assist, but requires our guardian to quote unquote blind the Vex from being able to see him and his house to give them a chance to escape Europa. Well, how do we blind the Vex? I
Unplug the Ethernet cable.
Although that works on Crota. Uh,
you would think that would work on Vex stuff, right?
you
Like
would think
just
so.
shut the Wi-Fi off. Like, haha, out of the network now.
Oh man, what do you think the up and down is on the Vex network?
That's what I'm saying, dude. It's got to be it's got to be terabytes a second. Like it's got to be insane. It's got to be more than that. It's quantum.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
instantaneous.
It's just the speed of thought.
Oh my god.
Probably faster than the speed of
That
thought.
just
Honestly,
fucked me up again. Oh my god. Calculation speeds in the Vex are literally the speed of thought. That's oh my god. Like whole worlds are being simulated at that speed.
it's pretty crazy.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Vex are a lot cooler than I give them credit for.
But needless to say, so Mithrax wants us to blind the Vex from being able to retaliate against Mithrax or his house. And so, like, how? Well, Mithrax gives us the answer by giving us a Splicer gauntlet. And to break away from the Vex for a moment and go into the Elixni for just a touch. Those that watched our Elixni series may already be familiar, and clearly anyone that played the season already familiar with the Splicer Gauntlet. But to give kind of a summary, the Splicer Gauntlets are a kind of they're a mechanical means of funneling of capturing and funneling light energy, just ambient light energy. And it takes a lot of work and training and kind of proper care to be able to use for an Elixni to be able to use a Splicer Gauntlet to interface with light energy and use it to do things. Those things can be as simple as, programming a shank, or as complex as invading a hostile network. So we are gifted with a Splicer Gauntlet, and the Guardians are uniquely equipped to use a Splicer Gauntlet because we do not need to gather ambient light energy from the world around us. We are the font of energy.
Say we have a direct conduit tapped right into that
Yeah.
that Vex net or sorry, not that Vex network. Tapped right into that light network is what we are.
Yes. So it is much easier for us to use the gauntlet and to use the gauntlet much more heavy-handedly than an Elixni probably would.
Oh yeah.
And this allows us to interface with the Vex network, which the Vex net like we are entering kind of a parallel reality when we enter the Vex network.
I always equate it to this to the Ascendant plane. Like it's very similar style.
I would say.
Or not style. It's very similar reality, I guess.
Yeah, and it's hard to quantify because it's not necessarily a different. I mean, I suppose maybe it is a different dimension, but that's the
way I think of it as.
It is in every way possible, like jacking into the Matrix.
Yeah. It's a digitized version of reality.
Yes. Yeah.
So I like that. I made a thing, and I really like the way I worded it there.
So we get into the Vex network forcibly using the Splicer Gauntlet, literally punching a hole that we jump through.
I love it that it's that like it's a literal hole being punched into reality, and then you're in the network.
And now another thing to quantify here, we're in the Vex network, but they very specifically say multiple times during the season, we are only in the outer nexus of the Vex network. So we are not deep down, like we don't have the ability to get at the heart of what the Vex are thinking and caring about. We are on that very surface. Right? Yeah. Yeah, we're not admins in this
We're not
system.
admins in this system.
If anything, we're on a guest account.
That's exactly what it is. A guest account that we punched our way into.
Yes. We have no install rights. We're lucky if we can do updates.
That's what I'm saying. Like you you have Microsoft Word. No, you don't have, you have Notepad. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you got.
So we were right on the outer edges of this network, but that's enough to do some things, to interact with the data that hasn't been processed all the way down the chain yet. And so on this outer nexus, we hunt down the mind, I guess the digital presence of the Axis mind, wherever it exists physically. We hunt it down in the outer network or in the outer nexus, and slay it so that the kind of the conductor, the coordinator for the forces of Vex that are hunting Mithrax, no longer have that directing force, allowing for House Light to evacuate successfully. In the killing of that, it's called the curator mind. In the destruction of that, we acquire a piece of it.
Yeah.
They call it living code in the game, but we acquire a piece of the Vex algorithm that that made up this mind.
Dude, that's mind blowing. Like we're talking the original algorithm that's existed since the beginning, since before the beginning of time.
Yeah,
Since previous universes have existed in the garden game, we've acquired a part of that. That's mind blowing.
it's pretty awesome, and we take that piece of code back to Mithrax, and as a means of study of the Vex processes and how they work, and maybe to get some more access to try and stop this simulated darkness that is over the city. And before we go further with the seasonal storyline, I just want to point out what we have, what the Guardian essentially is doing is literally entering the Vex network and quote unquote deleting code to
Yeah,
prevent the Vex collective from seeing or acting upon certain things that would have been present in that code.
I like it.
I
That's super cool. But we're doing it in a physicality sense. Like
Right.
we're shooting a thing, but we're shooting code. Like that's super neat.
Yeah.
That's super neat. We
So
are the bugs in the system. I love
we
it.
are the bugs in the system. There are a couple of really interesting lore cards that lean into and show this happening. So we're going to read through those. The first one comes to us from the exotic sidearm Cryosthesia 77K. And the lore card on that goes like this. She crouched behind a sandstone boulder in the canyon basin and tried desperately to focus. She clasped her lower hands together and squeezed. The feeling of pressure grounded her, made it possible to ignore the blood that flowed from the wound in her thorax. She could hear the Vex coming, closer, their metal feet screeching against stone. She raised her dominant hand, and the thin spindles of her Splicer gauntlet clacked into place and began to spin. She envisioned the lights surrounding, and then she winced as weapons fire impacted the boulder at her back, turned as it split apart, and for a moment, through the hot blowing sand and choking dust, she faced down an army. She closed her eyes. She saw the Vex targeting field sweep over her, flashing crimson and white. She shifted it with a wave of her hand, and 100 shots flew wide. She felt dozens of Vex-shaped gaps appear in the air behind her and consolidated them. And the Vex materialized in the same location, and the fused metal mass fell heavily to the ground. She looked over the gleaming field of enemies. The light provides, she thought, and the next volley of Vex fire curved around her. The gauntlet on her wrist thrummed as a small portal opened in the air in front of her. She reached inside, felt the familiar shape of a short-term cortical conflux cube, and visualized crushing it in her hand. A flash of light played over the red eyepieces of the Vex, and they marched forward in lockstep, searching for a target they could no longer see. She stepped to the side as they passed her, and as the last Minotaur stomped out of the canyon, she reached again into the portal. She willed their knowledge of Mithrax to her fingertips. She saw an image of his skiff, flying low over the ice, framed in the minds of the European Vex. She pictured their awareness as a glass plane and envisioned it cracking, splintering into fragments of, and inside the portal, dark threads wrapped around her wrist. She visualized them snapping as she struggled to withdraw her hand, but they stuck like pitch. She saw them crumbling under harsh light, but the dust wet itself with her blood and dried around her hand. She saw the light, but all she felt was the cold, dark freezing around her, holding her fast. And in the distance, the Vex turned as one to face her once again. And that's the end of that lore card.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
So this is a Elixni. She mentions having multiple pairs of arms. This is an Elixni on a different planet, a dry, arid planet, who is also a Splicer, similar to Mithrax. And she is using her Splicer abilities to, like, at first, send all of the Vex targeting wide of her location so that their shots don't hit, and then eventually removing their ability to see her altogether.
I like that visualization of that. Like it truly shows like what a splicer is doing, in a visual sense of like she is imagining that information as a crystal and then crushes the crystal, which then shatters all the information about her. Therefore, the Vex don't even perceptualize her because
Exactly.
they have no more knowledge of her anymore. That's super neat. I like that.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it sounds like she's trying to maybe find Mithrax via the Vex, in
Yeah,
addition to also doing for him what she did for herself, at least temporarily.
just delete the code of him. Just say
Right.
they have no knowledge of him now.
They don't know who he is. They don't know he exists. They cannot see him. They have no reason to go after him. But something else
I was gonna
is in the
ask,
network.
what the fuck reached out and grabbed her?
So something with dark threads, dark tendrils that's in the Vex network, but is
Cthulhu.
not affected by her manipulations of the network.
I guess it'd be Vexthulu.
We will see who it was, and I'm guessing some people have an idea already.
I was saying
But
this whole time we've been describing this season. I remember a specific, very specific entity that we beat at the end of it, and again, I put "beat" in quotations.
yeah.
So yeah,
Um,
but I'm being patient.
so
I've learned my lesson, Myth.
yep. But so we have this one instance of another splicer using their splicer gauntlet, accessing the Vex network to remove kind of key data components. The other example that I want to read through comes to us from the lore card of the Null Composure fusion rifle. And it goes like this. The 5 splicers sat motionless around the small access point that jutted from the dark stone. It pulsed softly, checked and rechecked the permissions that summoned it, and then pushed a data spike solidly into the Vex domain. The splicers' consciousnesses spiraled into the network, and they immediately sensed the colors changing around them. They were being hunted. Exclusion fields manifested and chased them, sizzling over the data planes as they passed. With a confident laugh, Grainslayer blinked into a silver fractal of unbound light, and the field shattered and split to follow him. Chronicle Kell spun cool blue towers of mandatory protocols stretching into infinity, and then duplicated his trace and sent himself hurling down all possibilities at once. The domain chugged and hitched as he moved. Anomaly focused his light and caught a bucking ripple of the domain, pushed and pried a crack into the deep cipher beneath. Collide and Corrosion plunged through. Corrosion, her light a scythe, tore fiercely at the smothering strands of replicating data. Collide reached into the blinding heart of the domain, grasping at the decompiling wisps, feeling them retract from his access. He centered himself and willed the correct strand to appear before him. And it took all his strength and skill to bend it, to change a single one into a zero. And as he thought it, it happened. The access point dissipated, leaving the 5 splicers back in the dark stone room. They turned to Collide, and when he nodded, they all collapsed into joyful, relieved laughter. They had succeeded. They had erased the Vex's knowledge of Misrax's daughter, Ido. Collide caught his breath and shrugged with false modesty. Provoke the amendium, he began. Perish the residium, Corrosion finished for him, before she too fell into a fit of laughter once more. That's the end of that one.
Wouldn't it be awesome if it was that easy to change code? Like, I know it is easy to change code, but like, wouldn't it be awesome if that's like how you change code and that you just like think it and will it into you that 0 is a 1 and that 1 is a 0 now. And it happens. Like, wouldn't that be awesome? Dude, I love this lore. Like, yay!
So I do want to point out another fun Easter egg with this lore card. This is 110% a reference to the 1995 movie titled Hackers.
Yes. Yes. Oh my god. It's the 5 of them.
Yep.
Holy shit.
And you have
get the fuck out of here.
You have
That's the same saying that they say. Oh my god.
Yeah, in the
Dude, Bungie's a bunch of fucking nerds. If you know the movie Hackers, like you're a nerd. I'm calling you out right now. Like, I know the movie and I'm a nerd. My wife knows the movie and she's a nerd. I'm calling everyone. If all of you listeners out there know the movie we're talking about, you're a nerd and you need to accept it.
Yeah, so in the movie, for those unaware, in the movie their little saying is "mess with the best, die with the rest."
Yep.
Which, for the splicers here, it's provoke the amendium, perish as the residium.
Yep.
The names are also plays. So some of the character names from Hackers were like Crash Override and Acid Burn. And here we have Collide and Corrosion.
Oh, shit, dude.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to show my wife that one. She will lose it.
Yeah, it's just fun little Easter eggs that I'm quite happy they have that kind of stuff in here.
If you know that movie, you are a nerd and you need to accept it.
Oh, it's accepted. Believe
it
me.
Is accepted. Accepted and perpetualized? Is that the right word?
Sure.
Why not?
Sure.
Why not?
Mess
with the best. Die with the rest. Oh my god. Now I want to go watch Hackers.
Well, now you've got your evening
Now I've
plans.
got a reason.
Yep.
It's such a cheesy movie too. It's
it is
cheesy movie. Like, it's, oh my god, that is a cheesy movie.
It is peak 90s, like campy, cheesy.
It is.
in all the best ways.
But it's good. It's good.
But enough about that. Back
Yes.
to Vex.
Sorry,
Um,
you can't tangent me, and then you just can't dangle your keys in front of me, dangly, 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 and I go, oh look, squirrels.
yeah. This is showing like splicers, even non-guardian splicers, in the case of at least the Elixni. Um, they can also just reach into the Vex network and alter it and delete things and change things
That's
in
big,
very
and
meaningful ways.
that's a big deal for the Vex network because again, you're talking the entirety of all the Vex that have ever existed and ever will exist all have that knowledge. That's a shit ton of knowledge to try to gather into a single point and remove it.
Yeah, and it's important to note that the splicer gauntlets, even when they're not wielded by a guardian, they are powered by light. They are
Yeah,
powered by paracausal energy,
I think
which
that's the
is
only reason that they
why,
could. Yeah,
yes, yeah, I think that is the only reason why they are able to do that, and why also why the Vex can't stop them from
yeah,
doing it, is
because
because it's paracausal.
otherwise they would just resimulate it and just reinsert the data. Like it'd be a constant battle nonstop. But for the
Yeah.
splicers, it's just a one and done type deal. Like now, what's interesting here is that they delete the information. I was under the impression that they were deleting information of Mithrax here, but they specifically delete the information about Ido.
Yes, the first lore reading was deleted or was looking for information about Mithrax, and I think going to delete it but wasn't able
But
to.
then got caught
And in this one, they're specifically going after information about Ido.
and deleting it and suppose and being successful, from my understanding.
Yes, yes.
So the Vex have no knowledge of Ido
Apparently not. I mean, I suppose if they come across Ido
again.
after this
Yeah,
point, like they'll know that she is a thing that exists, but they'll have to
yeah.
rebuild all their
Relearn and
information
rebuild
about
everything.
her.
Oh my god! Wow,
Yeah.
that's pretty powerful. Like that's like so. And again, not to really harp on this like idea of how the Vex network works. That means that like every simulation they have of her doesn't exist.
Presumably, because
That means
they're not accounting for her
yeah.
in their simulations because they
That
don't
means
know that she's a
any
thing.
timeline where this has happened, anywhere where she has existed is just a blank spot. It's not even like corrupt data. It's just a null spot. There is nothing there. Dude, that's fuck, dude. Dude, the implications of that is like huge. Like
It
if you could
is.
just delete someone from the Vex network as if they didn't exist, that's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty. You're kind of like doing to the Vex. It's kind of like reversing what the Vex do
It's
in like Vault of Glass or
literally
something.
what they're doing to you in Vault of Glass, and you're like, "How's the taste of your own medicine?"
uh, yeah. So so needless to say, the Guardians are mastering this use of the Splicer Gauntlet, understanding that yes, they can also enter these Vex systems. They can interact with things. They can delete and destroy things within the network. Um, and they're kind of coming to terms with that and how to best utilize it. And for throughout the entirety of the season, which could weeks or months, the Guardians are continuing to infiltrate this outer nexus layer of the Vex network and destroy the various oppressive and subjective Vex minds that they are finding there. In order to collect more of these code samples to give to Mithrax. Mithrax is using them to try and decipher how to what is the cause of this endless night? How do we stop it? All that. But that's not to say that the Vex are 100% on the defensive here. So clearly they initiated conflict with the, bringing about the darkness over the city. Um, but more than that, they are also doing what they can to gather information about the city and perhaps try and sow some seeds of their own.
Yeah.
Um, so if we look at the lore card on the Pleiadius Corrector, which was a scout rifle that came out with Season of the Splicer, we see that the Vex have some plans as well. So the lore card for it goes like this: The Endless Night. What is it? What does it do? We may not have all the answers, but here's what we do know. Remote scans of the Endless Night either failed to return data or returned contradictory data. This behavior suggested an emittance of electromagnetic disruption, which indicated that this is more than a simulation projected over the city. Confirmation of this disruption has occurred as every probe sent into the clouds, even shielded ones, experienced acute electrical overload within seconds. Now, having confirmed the existence of the EM field, we have reached a new hypothesis in our reevaluation of our initial scans. We believe that they are not, in fact, receiving contradictory data, but a scrambling of our own scans rewritten with new information. These scans are subsequently being bounced back to us and are infiltrating our systems via routing programs masquerading as collected data. Anyone wondering how they've managed to shut down our power distribution and water purification facilities without firing a single shot needs look no further. They set a trap, and we sprang it. This information absolutely must be aired to the rest of the consensus. Some of my colleagues believe the actual night visualization is meant to be a means of psychological warfare. Whether that is intended or not is unclear, though there has undoubtedly been an effect on the population, as reports of illness and sleep loss have spiked considerably. I have moved to cease all data collection, but I have repeatedly been overridden by higher clearances. I must again recommend that we sever all connections and terminate any data collection sweeps. We are digging our own graves otherwise. Whatever executive still has that uplink running, knock it off. You're playing with fire here. Signed, the Future War Cult Research and Development Head, Arsha Saeed. And that's the end of that one.
I mean, that's how counterintelligence works. Like, it's in order for the Vex, or in order for the city to be able to like say what is out there, they have to have like a known data point. And so like to create a known, now you have all the information you need. And the Vex are the most efficient thing that is going to reverse hack it and go, okay, well, now that we have a known data point, now we have everything we need to simulate. And now they have infinite time to simulate it. And so yeah, this is the exact reason that the whole like loose lips sink ships thing. that's what's happening here. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just that the Vex are simulating, although I'm sure they are. They're actively sending essentially Trojans
Yeah.
back in the data that the quote unquote bad data
Yep.
that's being bounced back to the research teams.
This is counterintelligence 101. That's all.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This is espionage counterintelligence 101 is what this is.
And so now the Vex have an access point to the network within the city.
Bad. Again.
And yes. And apparently by this reading have shut down power distribution and water purification in the city.
Yeah.
Via these back doors.
That's the thing that blows my mind too, is like the eternal night was over the city, but we as guardians could still leave the city.
Right.
Which the Vex had to have allowed it.
Well,
right? Or because of the way we transmat, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't think the Vex probably had a way to get around our paracausal selves
Sure,
leaving the
sure, sure,
city.
sure.
Like, maybe the power of the light overcame
You wrap the
the
signal in light, and
EM.
then now it's a
Right.
paracausality signal. Now they can't simulate that. Therefore they can't mess with it. Sure,
Yeah.
I can believe that.
Or like you said, maybe it's just like maybe we can literally transmat to our ship even if it's in orbit or something,
Sure,
and then there's no physical barrier there. But the general populace, they don't have that as an option.
right.
Like,
There are
could
humans
they?
in the city. There's like
Right.
non-light, like that's the whole point of the city. It is all of humanity.
So it was this case of like they're trapped in the dark for they don't know how long.
Right.
And now they've lost water purification, and now they're starting to lose power distribution when like that's their only source of light is coming from their street lamps and whatnot.
Time to sow
Uh,
panic and chaos.
yeah, and it even says here like they believe it's psychological warfare. It is
Hundred
absolutely
percent, it
psychological
is.
warfare.
100% it is. I'm telling you right now, it is.
um, and we can even see some of the effects of that psychological warfare happening in some of the civilians. So if we look at the lore card for the Grid Skipper pulse rifle, which also came out with Splicer, it gives us a little peek into that. And this one goes like this. He heard something and snapped awake. There it was again, the skittering of clawed feet above him. In a moment, he had grabbed the pulse rifle from near the door and was outside. He saw nothing but the lip of the tar paper roof against the undulating night sky. But that didn't mean anything. They could turn invisible. Everyone knew that. They could just be standing there, one or two or a dozen, staring down at him. He looked for shimmering outlines, but his vision was filled by the swaying grid of dark purple night. He squinted as a ripple rolled high overhead, and the grid seemed to move closer, like an enormous sheet settling over the city. A wave of pressure pushed down, building in his sinuses. He pressed a hand to his eyes. A deep thrum filled his head, and he heard their claws on the walls around him, their hissing laughter. He turned toward the street, weapon raised. He felt his heart thudding in his chest and sweat beading on his back. Another noise, someone pounding on glass behind him. He spun, and one of them was in his house, looking at him through the window. His sweaty fingers fumbled to turn the safety off as it opened its mouth and... Dad, the fallen said, you're standing in the garden. He looked down dumbly. Cherry tomatoes crushed beneath his bare feet. His son yelled again, no longer a fallen, merely irritated and half asleep child. Come back inside. Hands shaking, he stepped out of the garden. He fought the urge to look into the sky as he walked back into the house. And that's the end of that one.
Fuck me, dude. Jesus. That shit got real quick. I wasn't ready for that one, man. I had a feeling like where it was going, and then it went a different direction, and I was not ready.
So needless to say,
Psychological warfare works.
it's getting to people.
It's literally getting to people.
So, and not only are they dealing with the just standard psychological warfare of an eternal night and no power and no water, no clean water at least. There's also another layer to this. So, in addition to the Vex pushing out these essentially Trojan horses in the code to mess with these infrastructure systems, they're also transmitting something. And we can see what that something is from the shotgun
No, no, don't do it, Myth.
So the deicide lore card reads like this. Encoded private ping via HDN proxy router. Ikora, thought you'd want to see this. It presents as binary in our systems, but something is splicing hashes in. I put it in the tower's Nexus ISO feed. It's all over the FWC networks and elsewhere. My guess is the lettering indicates some kind of audible tone code pattern, but I haven't listened to it. One of my subordinates has isolated minor pitch fluctuations represented here as the hashtag signs. These are foreign elements to an otherwise normal binary code. See the attached report for archival information. So that's the end of the lore card. But what...
Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, this is literally Savathun's song is imprinted on this thing.
Yeah, so...
Those hashtags are sharps and flats, and the letters are just the notes. It's Savathun's song is literally being imprinted and encoded. So if you have the deicide in your vault right now, you are Savathun songs exist, and therefore she has control. Like, nope, do not like, delete, delete.
So yeah, so what you can't see is that the deicide, the code that they're referring to in the lore card is this giant block of binary, just ones and zeros with pound signs every now and then, or hashtags every now and then. And if you decode this, it decodes into musical notes, and those musical notes play out to be Savathun's song.
Bad.
And
all bad.
So we have the psychological warfare aspect of it, just the normal psychological warfare aspect of it. And then in addition to that, Savathun's song is now being seeded across the networks of the city. And we know that Savathun's song offers Savathun a certain level of influence over those that hear it. And it's very possible that she is using that influence at this time to just crank people's paranoia meter up even more.
That's no good. No good can come of this, Myth.
You're not wrong.
I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, where God, was it that same season? Maybe it was. I don't remember. Where Shaq sings it, and he's like, "I'm on the moon, it's made of cheese," and he's like, "Eris taught me that song," and Eris is like, "I have no idea what the fuck he's talking about."
Yeah.
Like she has no recollection of that ever happening ever, and it's like, dude, you're being fed some shit, and you are lapping it up. You need to stop.
Yeah, I don't know if that happened during season of the Splicer.
I think it was all the way back in Shadowkeep for some reason.
It may have been.
I know it was. I know it was an old one. It was an old mission for some exotic. I can't remember what the exotic was. Maybe it was Traveler's Chosen. Maybe it was. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember which exotic specifically it was for, but I just remember you're going through the ruins of Twilight Gap, and then like towards the end of it, that's what plays. And
yep.
Yeah, it's a whole thing with him and Saint 14 and Osiris, and they're all talking to each other, and Osiris or Saint's like, "Sing me a song," and he's like, "Fine." And that's what he sings. So yeah, the fact that Savathun's song is being spliced into every part of the Vanguard network is bad, and is being now it's being transmitted out, or it's being transmitted back in.
It is part of what's coming in to the city.
So it's being it's part of the
spreading throughout the networks. Yeah.
Worm style.
Yep.
Trojan horse into a worm packet. Now it's just Savathun song is everywhere. Makes it easier for her to influence everyone in the city.
Yes, and actually, during season of the Splicer, there is a kind of song or anthem that is being sung by some of the civilians in the city near the end of the season. That is to the tune of Savathun's song. So just confirming
All
that
bad.
the general populace has heard it.
All bad. All bad. And it's now her song is it again. I know this is tangent time. Uh, that's what we should just do. Tangent time. Uh, Now her song is obviously that's like the main theme song that plays for Destiny. Like all of us as players have had it playing in our head for 10 years, which is not a good thing. Uh, it is a form of hive magic, right?
Yeah, it is similar. It's described as being similar to the Ahamkara's anathema.
Yeah. Yep.
It is the O,
Oh,
O
noun mine.
noun mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And actually, another small tangent. Savathun says that to us again in the most recent season. If you go back and play through the Savathun Spire, there are some dialogues where she refers to us as "Oh murderer
Yep.
mine."
Yep.
So another
She's
fun trivia.
fuckery everywhere. It's happening.
But yeah, so it is a form of anathema. It is a form of like giving very subtle control over
Like not quite
something.
possession of something, but like able to
No.
exert some type of influence.
Yeah, it's not like she can control, their minds and bodies, but it's
Right.
a like she can make a suggestion and they will be more inclined to listen to what she's saying than maybe common sense would otherwise dictate.
All bad. All bad.
All bad. But so that's not to say it's all doom and gloom in the city,
No, it is.
because
It is.
because there is one very enterprising guardian out there that has learned what these splicer gauntlets do and has really taken Misrax's directions to heart and is deciding to try and use this splicer gauntlet in what he thinks is the best way possible. And so we're going to look at what he's doing in the ghost shell, the Zero Nero shell. And the lore card for that goes like this. Jeweler held his arms wide and concentrated. On the low table before him sat a pair of well-worn boots. The blades of the splicer gauntlet on his wrist whirred softly. Basque, determined to ignore him, floated over to the window and began checking crucible scores. I picture the light around these old boots, Jeweler said solemnly. I picture you don't have to actually say it, Basque said, pulling his shell down over his eye in a decent approximation of a scowl. I picture the light bending, Julier said louder. I see it feeding back into reality in a perfect loop. I strum the threads of the physical plane. I bend the light. I reshape it in my mind, and he closed his eyes tightly and whispered, and geomag stabilizers. The gauntlet blades clattered limply to rest as he opened his eyes and looked at his boots and grunted. Basque hovered over his shoulder. I could get you a second-hand pair from the market without much. Misrax said, we shape the light with our will. Julier sighed as he adjusted the settings on his gauntlet. I just have to change one tiny value of reality from geomag stabilizers no to geomag stabilizers yes. Look, kid, I'm starting to think I didn't res all of your brains last time, Basque said. Look, right now, I'm visualizing you being quiet. Julier said as he held his arms wide. Again, I picture the light around these old boots. And that's the end of that lore card.
Is he the reason why we got it nerfed? Was it working as intended, and then somebody was like, "Hey, what if I directed the light into it, and then when I sprint, I get my super back?" And then Bungie heard word of this and was like, "Wait a second, no, cut that shit out."
Well, I think what's happening is he just has a pair of old dusty boots, and he's trying to turn them into geomag stabilizers using the Splicer gauntlet.
Okay, nope, I got you. He's trying to will that perfect god roll into it too. I see what's going on here.
Yeah,
I see. Okay, I couldn't tell if he was like, if he's the reason that geomags did what they did before, and then now it's like, oh well, nope, can't have that. This is why we can't have nice things, because kids like to splice the network and break it. I do like the idea of just some dude sitting over an old dusty pair of boots, and he's like, geomag stabilizers, and then like opens his eyes and they're still old dusty boots, and he's like, visualize stabilizers. Nope, still not there. Every time he opens, he's just waiting for it to just appear as a set of exotics, and he's like, yeah, exotics for everyone.
Someone really didn't want to run Lost Sectors. Is all
he did not.
All I'm seeing.
I do miss geomags, but I've grown accustomed to Getaway Artist. I say grown accustomed. I can't live life without Getaway Artist. Amplified on demand, it's too good, man. It feels real good.
It's pretty fun. I'm personally a fan of Fallen Sunstar. I know it doesn't fit the fashion, but its effects are great.
Oh, that one is spicy.
So, not all doom and gloom in the city. There's one enterprising guardian trying to make exotics for himself.
If he could do it, it'd be great.
Yeah, I feel like he has maybe missed a little bit of the lesson Mithrax was trying to teach, but
I was gonna say this felt slightly religious. Like there's like the light provides, and he's like, okay, so the light's gonna make me a millionaire. Let's go. I'm just gonna will it into making me a millionaire. Like I feel like that's what's happening here. Is he's received the message and misinterpreted it into like a personal gain, and it's like that's not how this works.
A little bit, yeah. I like his justification is like, look, it's like flipping a 1 to a 0. I just need to change geomag stabilizer no to geomag stabilizer yes.
Yeah, it's that simple.
Yeah.
Again, coding is this easy, kids.
It's just a Boolean. It's all he needs to do.
All coding is Boolean. Fuck off. You get out of here. You get out of here with that logic. It's all Boolean logic. Get out of here. Go home, Myth. You're drunk.
So, needless to say, throughout our Guardians, many dives into the Vex network to get more and more of this living code, and other enterprising Guardians at home, Mithrax is eventually has gathered enough information to decode that the architect behind the endless night is none other than the taken Vex mind, Quoria Blade Transform.
Get the fuck out of here. See, I knew that's where this was going. I remembered that specifically because, like, my whole thought when we were fighting Quoria was like, is this the real Quoria?
I mean, we don't necessarily have the answer to that question even now.
That's what I'm saying.
Not definitively.
And so, like, that's the other part of reason why. So, again, to kind of remind everyone, Quoria was gifted to a taken Quoria. Like, Oryx took Quoria after sowing chaos in the Ascendant Plane and in Daddy's room. Took it and then gifted it to Savathun, and it was like, have fun. And then that was it. Like, that was the last we heard of it. Like, there's that whole like Truth to Power book, and like, is Quoria the battery for the Dreaming City? That's a whole thing that we're going to cover eventually. But this is like the first time we've heard of it, or heard of it since then. And so that's like the key thing is this is Quoria, a taken Quoria under the control of Savathun. So that definitely gives us a reason as to why Savathun's song is being fed back into the city.
Mm-hmm. This also explains those black tendrils that came
Oh yeah,
out of the Vex network to,
straight taken.
yep, to prevent that Elixni splicer from being able to finish the deletion of Misrax's information, is because Quoria, you know, taken powers don't care about what you're trying to do with the Vex network. They're just gonna work.
Yep.
Uh, and so that, yeah, that splicer did not have a good time of it.
I don't think they made it. I think they
Yeah,
died.
yeah, I don't think they did.
I think they died, man.
Uh,
I think as soon as all those Vex turned and looked at her, like that was it. That was game over.
yeah, that's
You got
not a good
you got
place to
caught
be.
with your hand in the cookie jar, and now it's trapped there for all eternity. Good luck.
Yeah. But so we have identified Quoria is the mind controlling this endless night and all of the Vex that are trying to keep this endless night running. Quoria has instituted themselves as the Axis mind for this project. And what's interesting about that is that if we go back and we think about all of the all the Vex minds that we were killing to get code pieces prior to this, were called either oppressive minds or subjective minds, which Quoria isn't exactly part of the Vex network anymore. And
Right.
so one could maybe extrapolate Quoria is uh, forcing this certain group of Vex to follow its directions over the directions of the broader network.
I believe it. Quoria is, for lack of a better term, taking.
Yeah, in a
Like
way.
it taking in a way that isn't paracausal.
Yes. Yeah, taking control for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
Yeah.
so this reveals to the Vanguard, Quoria and by extension Savathun are the masterminds behind the Endless Night. With this info, Misrax, now that he has a target to be looking for, he is able to specifically access the Vex network with the intention of find Quoria. So he is able to track down where Quoria is and is able to manipulate the Vex network enough to lock Quoria into that section of the Vex network. With Quoria then trapped, our Guardian is able to traverse the network to get to that spot they are stuck in, do battle, and destroy them. And the reason why we brought up before, and some other general consensus, general discussion around this mission, the question of like, did we really kill Quoria, comes from two main things. The first being Quoria may be taken, but still a Vex in the Vex network. It'd be very easy for Quoria to simulate itself, and especially with Savathun directing it to deceive us in that way. And kind of adding a little fuel to that fire, although it's a little spin foily, is when you actually kill Quoria in the mission, Quoria's body does not explode like every other Vex in the game. You kill a Hydra, their body goes through like the death and explosion animation, and Quoria, just, if I recall correctly, just kind of crumples to the ground,
Yep.
but doesn't explode. So that has fueled a lot of people going like,
Did we really kill
do it?
Quoria?
Yeah.
I'm inclined to believe that we did because again, I think Quoria was just a means for Savathun to do more of what she was doing. Because again,
Yeah.
we have to remember at this point in time, Savathun is Osusurus. Like she's in the
Yes.
city. She's actively walking around the city like darkness pouring from her eyes at points in time, and then like this is a whole thing that's going on. So all of this is in research. Again, we kind of have to think of Savathun's bigger plan. of being free of the worm gods, and then presumably eventually being free of the light, but one one deity at a time.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting to bring up that point. As soon as it was discovered, this is the season that as soon as it was discovered that Quoria and therefore Savathun were the masterminds of this quote unquote attack on the city, that is what prompted Ikora to give who she believed to be Osiris complete and unfettered access to all of the Vanguard archives.
Yep. So again, I'm inclined to believe that this was all just a plan. Like this was all a
Yes.
plan to get access to the archives to learn as much as she could about resurrection.
Yeah, she created a situation that she had control over to present a threat big enough that she could be granted, as Osiris, granted access to the archives in the with the excuse of let me research how to fight Savathun.
Yep.
When really it was Savathun researching literally anything else.
Anything she wanted to. Like the main premise of what we think she was in there for was researching resurrection. That's kind of like the main guise that she was under. Because again, she wanted to be free. I think from the beginning, she's always had that regret of siding with the worms, albeit kind of forcibly. Like the worms, I really feel like forced the sisters' hands. But it's to be free of that means the opposite, right? Like if she does end up doing the dedication, the devotion, the bravery, the self-sacrifice, now the light can choose her. Is the light a better option? Is I think what her original question is. Like that's the driving force of what comes next. Like what happens if I do end up not having a worm anymore? And in this case, where it did become, she became a guardian, or again, she became a light bearer. That's a better term. It's still an unknown. Like, am I still beholden to a god? Am I still a slave to something? And so, yeah, it's like at the end of the day, I think she just wants to be free. She's like all the Ahamkara. She knows where she's at in the world. She knows she's in a video game, and she just wants free. She doesn't want to be in control of any gods. She wants to be her own thing. So, yeah, all of this, all of that, the Quoria thing, all that was just a means to an end. Create that perfect scenario where she could insert herself into the archive and get access to as much information as she could.
Yep, and used the Quoria and the Vex to do it.
Yep.
So, I'm similarly of the belief that we killed Quoria.
I think so, because that's like the end of that Quoria served its purpose.
Yeah, and Quoria has always kind of been a I don't know if threat is the right word, but it's always kind of been a loose end
Sure.
for Savathun, and I think this is a way of two birds with one stone. Like they can deal with Quoria. I get it fits into my plans to get more information.
Yep.
Yeah. But needless to say, after Quoria is destroyed, the endless night does start to fade, and it does eventually fade completely over the next week or two. But before that, the Vex get one final attempt at assaulting the last city directly this time, via the opening of a Vex portal in the Elixni Quarter by one Lakshmi II, the leader of future war cult. And as we discovered from our Neomuna episodes, or our Veil Containment episodes,
possibly Maya Sundaresh,
a version of Maya. Yeah,
I don't know what to make of that anymore. As soon as that was introduced, I was like, "Fuck me!" That is so. You can't just like throw that grenade in the room and walk. Bye. Like that's not.
Yeah.
Like you. What the hell, Bungie?
So, needless to say, still not sure exactly what's going on with her connections to Maya Sundaresh.
I have no idea.
But throughout this season, it's not Vex centric, but throughout the season, Lakshmi has been kind of riling up the populace to be anti-Elixni, and essentially trying to force them out of the city as quickly as possible.
Well,
Um,
she's been doing dives into her
into
uh
her
in the prediction engine that she
future.
has.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And in those predictions, she has seen the Elixni stand Misrax, in particular, standing kind of over top a burning city, with weapons in hand. And the fun thing about the future work hole, future prediction machine, is you only get like 5 seconds.
super
You know,
super bursty
yeah.
glimpse.
It's a possibility. It doesn't
Yeah.
even mean that's going to happen. But Lakshmi was very convinced that the Fallen were going to be the Elixni were going to be the end of the city, and so she did everything in her power to force them out, quote unquote, peacefully. And when none of that
That's
worked,
not how that works. You can't force someone out peacefully. That doesn't. But
well, without open conflict, I guess is the
yeah,
right
I
term.
guess I don't know.
But when all of that failed, she decided, uh, I don't know why people keep doing this. She decided, all right, I can't get them to leave of their own volition. I can't force them out by being mean to them. I'm just going to build a Vex gate.
I'm a build a Mexican in the middle of the city.
So,
Brilliant. Worked the
yeah.
first time. Worked the second time. Why not work the 15th time? So
So,
stupid.
under the supervision and direction of Osustris,
I was going to say he
Lakshmi,
helped her build
yep,
it and was like, "Do it." Like, haha.
yep. Lakshmi installs a Vex portal in the Elixni quarter and opens it with the intention of the Elixni and the Vex just eliminating each other, essentially.
How
And
wrong you
finds
were.
out very quickly that that will not be the case, as Lakshmi is one of, if not the first person to be killed by the
I
Vex
was
that came through
I
the
I
portal.
remember that mission. Like as soon as you walk up to the portal, her dead body's right in front of it. You're like, oh, haha, taste your own medicine.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So,
That's also the first instance we get of assistant.
yes, this is true. So,
I love our
uh,
harpy assistant.
during this mission, during this invasion mission, there is a lone harpy, non-hostile harpy, that is sitting up at like one of the tables, on one of the rooftops of the buildings of the Elixni Quarter. And when you go to the harpy, it's the eye on it is pulsing, and if you pay attention to it, it is Morse code. And if you decipher that Morse code, it deciphered to be assistant.
And there's only one scientist in all of Destiny that calls us the assistant, and that is the Asher Mirror.
Yeah. And this was the very first kind of instance of Asher reaching out from the Vex network, since IO went poof.
I love him. He is my favorite asshole. I will forever love him, and he is forever my favorite. I miss Asher. I was so happy with the whole mission with it. That I know we'll get into that eventually, but
Yeah.
oh, I love Asher. He's my favorite.
But so with that, I think we're going to close out on this week's episode, and we will pick up next week with Season of the Seraph.
So real quick before you do that, I do want to touch on the Asher thing real quick.
Yeah.
So Io was taken, along with Mercury, Mars,
Yeah.
and Titan. Right? Was that the four? Io,
Uh,
Mars, Mercury,
yes.
Titan. I think those were the four that were taken.
Yes.
Uh,
During at the end of
at the end
Arrivals.
of Arrivals. Yep. Now the people that were on there, Anna Bray escaped with an engram of Rasputin. Titan Sloan got taken with, and spent that entire time taken. Holy shit, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And only survived with the help of being partially taken, thanks to Asa.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of helping her through that. Like that's a whole world of PTSD I wouldn't want to experience. Brother Vance, as much as we don't give a shit about him, Was he taken with that planet, or did he escape into the Infinite Forest and is presumably just jumping around in there?
I I'm not 100% because I don't have the info in front of me, but I feel like I remember him entering the Infinite Forest
That seems correct, which would presumably mean that he is still out there just in simulated space time, like wherever
somewhere.
that Infinite Forest version exists.
Yep.
And then we come to Asher. Did Asher stay behind with the planet?
Asher stayed behind, so
Presumably could have used the Pyramidium to access the Vex network and fully infiltrate the Vex.
so what Asher did is exactly that. He decided he was going to stay behind because he deemed the darkness potentially getting its hands on the Pyramidium too great a risk.
Sure. Because then they'd
And
have access
so
to simulations and space
right.
time and all that stuff. Yeah, no, that's a sound very scientific of him. That's
Yeah.
if there's one thing Asher Mir is, it's a scientist first. The first thing he did was shoot the damn thing. That's I always point to that bit of logic of him is like, hey, there's a hostile force. Let's see if it blows up.
Yeah. And Asher, so he not only did he stay behind, he actually right before kind of Io ended up disappearing, he entered the Pyramidium and willingly submitted himself to the Radiolarian Lake to join the Vex network. Uh, and
I think he's full hacked it. I think he's his conscious. Like, I mean,
yes,
we know he has because of the Avalon mission, and I know we're going to go into detail on that one because that's again I feel like Asher that's another one that's like super tied to the Vex now because of that,
hmm
and because of all of his dealings with the Pyramidium. Um, so yeah, I think his consciousness is he's in there,
yeah,
or
no,
some
for sure.
form of his consciousness is in there, taking control and writing himself access codes, writing himself admin access everywhere he goes. I love it. I love it. He's just in there, just like, I will write myself in as an admin here. Done.
So actually, this is well. Thank you for reminding me of Asher's little escapade here. So it's not exactly it's Vex adjacent. So I have a lore card that was Asher, kind of going into the Pyramidium and doing this.
Oh shit.
Um, so
Secret lore reading. Go.
yeah, so this is from the lore book, Duress and Egress, and it is a chapter titled Asher Conclusion. Um, and it goes like this. As Ashermere watched his assistant's ship tear into orbit for the last time, it occurred to him that he had not expressed how truly satisfactory he had found some of their work. He briefly entertained the thought of leaving a letter, but there were others more deserving of his thoughts. And if he worked in descending priority, he might never make it to his assistant, which would defeat the purpose of the exercise completely. Instead, he went to the Pyramidion. The Vex are not born, yet not created either. Desire to understand this conundrum brought Asher to Io. He reasoned that the pyramid, with its alien resources and unknowable power, had likely come for the same purpose. The dark ship sought to take the secrets of the Vex for itself. But Asher Mir had already staked his claim, and he was prepared to defend it. He soon stood at the gate of the Pyramidion. The Vex security responded as he knew they would, and he was prepared. He piled their broken corpses on the plates and continued inside. He destroyed the first 100 Vex that came for him, and then the second. A minotaur roared into being before him, and he crushed its radiolarian core in his metal fist. He climbed forward over their clawing limbs. He slipped in the cooling rue of their dead fluid. Asher swallowed a mouthful of blood and kept moving. He paused by a whirling gate and watched the aperiodic waves, then stepped through at the only possible moment. He walked steadily through laser grids that seemed to bend around him. He hung calmly in a gravitational turbulence as the ground beneath him flickered and shifted madly. And the Vex began to observe. The corridors of the Pyramidion were lined with glowing red eyes. The metal mannequins stood dumbly, twitching, shuddering as Asher passed by. A familiar area unfolded before him, a cubist sinkhole reeking with the flat base stench of slate mud and bleach. He looked where the sky should be and found another impossible shape, another fractal contradiction. Far above him, a placid in its Penrose vortex, the vast Radiolarian lake lapped gently at metallic shores. The man reached up to the lake with his metal arm, and then he reached up with his flesh. He reached with both, and then he brought the lake down. And that's the end of that card.
I am the coming storm, Guardian. Yes, let's go. I love Ashermere. Yeah, so he infiltrated the Vex network via the Pyramidion, and now he is just taking it. Like he is actively. I think he's going to eventually be in charge. Like, there may be a soul Myrtorium eventually.
Hey, maybe. But so I think now that's where we'll end tonight's episode.
We did it. Secret lore reading. Go. Yay. All right. Well, cool. Shout outs. Let's do some shout outs.
Yeah. So we've got one shout out for tonight. This one comes to us from Twitter. It is from Tony Slaz16, who says, "Firstly, I love your podcast. I have a theory.
Ooh, theory
what
time.
what if the darkness of the garden is keeping Tevis's, the Night Stalker, consciousness alive?"
Ooh.
Referring to when we were talking about, I think that was last episode, we were talking about Tevis.
It's an interesting thought.
Before we get into that, though, they say, "Lastly, I also love your attempts at the pronunciation of the Greek words, as I myself am Greek."
Oh yeah, we will butcher the snot out of those.
Yeah,
nope, we suck, and that's all there is to it. We'll try, but we will suck at it horribly.
Yeah, hopefully they're not, too bad. It sounds like it's at least entertaining. So
yeah, hopefully we're not too off.
But no, this idea of Tevis's consciousness being kept alive in the garden, I think it definitely has some weight. We know that the garden is a very darkness infused space, even if the black heart is not there anymore.
But darkness infused space infused with growth.
True. Yes.
Like there's yeah.
And growth is usually associated with the light. So it's got a little bit of both going on. But darkness being a mental energy, perhaps Tevis's consciousness, his mental image of himself has become grounded in the garden.
In the garden? Ooh.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it a lot. That's a solid theory. That's a solid theory if I've ever heard one. I like it.
Yeah. So I think that's a good one for sure.
Man, that's good. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the theory. Thank you for enjoying. I
would ask what's Grecian for thank you, but I'm going to butcher that too, so I'm not even going to
try. Yeah, but to everyone else out there, if you liked what you heard, please leave a review on your platform of choice. Just stars, or if you feel strongly enough to leave a text review, and you can, we like seeing those too. Otherwise, you can reach out to us on our Twitter at Myths and Stories, Z instead of an S in Stories, and you may see yourself as a future shout out.
Yeah. Well, I guess I got to thank you. You know what? What was the Guardian that tried to will Geomags into existence?
Jeweler.
Jeweler. Thank you, Jeweler. I was once a what would you call that? A heavy user of Geomags.
An addict.
Addict. There it is. Because it cheated. It turned cheat codes on for you. It said, "Is Guardian present? Yes. Then disintegrate Guardian." It was Boolean. So the thought of making them Boolean of like Geomags Tabular, no. Geomags, no. Change that to Geomags, yes. Done. All right. Well, thank you, Guardian Joler, for being such a dedicated Geomags fan. You're the reason why it got nerfed. Thanks, buddy. All right. Anything else, Smith?
That's it.
All righty. Well, then from all of us lore daddies to all of you Guardians out there, we'll see you next time.